Hello students, today we will discuss about Planck quantum theory. Planck quantum theory basically explains the particle nature of light. As we know that light behaves shows dual behavior. It behaves like both wave as well as particle. So quantum theory explains the particle nature of light. What is the statement? The main statement of Planck quantum theory is that radiant energy. Now what is radiant energy? Energy which is traveling in the form of radiations. And we know that energy transfer from one place to another place in the form of radiation. An example is electromagnetic radiation, that is light. So radiant energy is emitted or absorbed in the form of packets of energy called photon or quantum. This means that energy travels from one place to another place in the form of small packets and not continuously. It travels in the form of small packets, one packet, another packet, another packet. That means it travels in the form of a continuous beam of packets. And those packets are known as photons or quantums. So this means that energy of light should also depend on the energy of these packets, quantums, and this expression is for the energy of photons or quantums. Energy of a photon is product of two things. First is Planck constant and another is mu, which is frequency of light. This expression gives the frequency of light, or this can also be written in this form hc upon lambda, where c is velocity of light is that is 3 into 10 power 8 meter per second, and where lambda is a wavelength of light. So this was the basic idea of Planck quantum theory, according to which the energy transfer from one place to another place, or it is absorbed or it is radiated in the forms of small packets, and these packets are known as quantums or photons. So the first thing was energy. We discussed that energy of light depends on the energy of these photons, and which are given by this formula is equal to h mu. Another thing is intensity. Intensity must also depend on these photons, and actually the intensity of light is number of photons falling per unit area per second. Number of intensity totally depends on the number of photons traveling per unit time, or it is passing from a particular place per unit time. Greater the number of photons falling on a surface per unit time, greater will be the intensity of light. Now, photon is a packet. Does it have mass also? The answer is rest mass of photon is 0. Rest mass means mass of photon when it is in rest. The rest mass of photon is 0. Photon does not have any mass when it is at rest. But the moving mass of photon is given by this expression h mu upon c square. H is Planck constant, mu is frequency, and c square is the velocity of light, 3 into 10 power 8 meter per second. This was so. As we know that a body always emits or absorbs energy in the form of packets. It will absorb either one quantum, it will absorb either 2 or 3 or 4 quantums. That means the amount of energy absorbed by a body, absorbed or radiated by a body, is always integral multiple of this thing. This is the energy of one photon. If it absorbs one photon, its energy will be h mu. If it absorbs 2 photons, it will be 2h mu. If it absorbs 3 photons, it will be 3h mu. So a body can absorb or emit energy in whole multiple of quantums or photons, and this is known as quantization of energy. Now this quantum theory explains a very important phenomena which could not be explained on the basis of wave nature of light, and that is known as photoelectric effect. Photoelectric effect can only be explained on the basis of the particle nature, that is quantum theory of light. Now what is photoelectric effect? Photoelectric effect is basically a phenomena in which when a metal is subjected to light, when it is exposed into light, the electrons come out from the surface. You must have seen solar panels. These all work on the same principle. When some metals, the photosensitive metals, are exposed to light, when the light falls on the surface of metal, electrons come out, and those electrons are transmitted into the circuit in the form of electricity. We will basically discuss about this concept. What is the explanation behind this concept? Photon. Okay, when electron is falling on the surface, or when light is falling on the surface of metal, this means photon is falling on the surface, because photon is, light is nothing but a beam of photons. Okay. Where a particular photon, a packet of light which has some energy into it, falls on the surface of metal, it transfers all the energy to the surface. Some amount of that energy is absorbed by electrons and they come out from the surface. So, number of electrons coming out from the surface depends on the number of photons, because one photon transfers its energy and then only one electrons come out. But this does not mean that the number of electrons coming out, that is photoelectrons, the electrons which come out from the surface during photoelectric effect are known as photoelectrons. So this does not mean that the number of photoelectrons will be equal to the number of photons, because the photon, the energy of photon is used for emission of electron, but it also used for increasing its velocity and some different things into the surface. But the number of electrons will surely depend on photon. It may not be equal, but it will depend on that. Number of photoelectrons will depend on number of photons standing on the surface of matter. Another thing is, again, as we discussed, number of photoelectrons. What is intensity of light? Intensity of light is number of photons per unit time. And the number of photoelectrons depend on photon. The number of photoelectrons depend on number of photon. That means number of photoelectrons depend on intensity. Number of photoelectrons, that is electrons coming out from the surface, depend on number of photons striking per unit time, and number of photons striking per unit time is known as intensity of light. So number of photoelectrons depends on intensity of incident light which is falling on the surface. Another thing is energy of photoelectrons. That means energy means kinetic energy. That means at what velocity the electrons come out from the surface. This depends on, again, energy of photon. Greater the energy of photon, greater will be the velocity of electrons coming out from the surface. And energy of photon is h nu. If you can see, h is a constant. That means energy of photon depends only on the frequency. So the kinetic energy of photoelectrons which will also depend on the frequency of light, the frequency of incident light. It will increase with increase in frequency, and surely it will decrease with increase in wavelength. Now why do electrons come out from the surface? They come out from the surface of metal because they get the enough energy from the light which is required for them in order to come out from the forces present within the surface. That means there is a minimum amount of energy required in order to emission of electrons take place. There should be a minimum amount of energy which is required. If the energy of photon or the incident light is less than that amount of energy, electrons will not come out from the surface. They will come out from the surface if they get that minimum amount of energy which is required for them in order to come out. So again, the energy of light, that means the energy of photon, depends on frequency. So if we are talking about a minimum amount of energy, that would be related with a minimum amount of frequency. So that minimum amount of frequency which is required in order to come out the electrons from the surface is known as threshold frequency. The minimum frequency of light required for emission of photoelectrons is known as threshold frequency. It is represented by mu naught. Now, another thing is there is no gap of time between the falling of light on the surface and emission of electrons. Light falls on the surface of metal, and at the same time electrons starting coming out from the surface. It means there is no gap of time between these two things. One is falling of light on the surface, and another is emission of electrons. These two take place simultaneously. Light falls on the surface, and within no time electrons come out. There is no time lag between the incidence of light and the emission of electrons. Okay, now if you see this setup, this is representing that light falls on the surface of metal and photoelectrons come out from the surface and they travel toward positive electrode with some velocity. Okay, if an external opposite potential is applied through this circuit, what will happen? It will prevent the movement of photoelectrons toward positive electrode. That means it will try to decrease the speed of electrons coming out. And if we continuously increase the external potential, there will be a time when electrons will stop moving. The velocity of photoelectrons coming out from the surface will become zero. And this potential is known as stopping potential. Product of this potential, which is required in order to stop the movement of electrons, or in order to make the velocity of photoelectrons zero, is represented by V naught, and product of that V naught with E, is charge and electron, is known as stopping potential. And definitely it will depend on what? The kinetic energy of photons, that is velocity of photoelectrons, kinetic energy of photoelectrons, or the velocity of photoelectrons. Greater the velocity or kinetic energy, greater will be the amount of external pressure required in order to stop it. Okay. Next thing is work function. What is work function? Work function is nothing but that minimum amount of energy which is required in order to emission of electrons take place. This is known as work function, and it is given by, represented as E naught, and it is given by H mu naught. H is Planck constant and mu naught is threshold frequency. Now another thing is maximum velocity. What will be the maximum velocity of photoelectrons? This will be calculated using this formula, and this is twice of stopping potential divided by m, and m is mass. So this was the Planck quantum theory and the explanation for photoelectric effect. I hope these all things are clear to you. Let me stop with this. Thank you.